Now let's take a look at what's happening in Ukraine. Now nuclear facilities have come under attack once again by the Russian troops. Now according to Ukraine's nuclear watchdog, a nuclear research facility in the second largest city of Ukraine is once again being shelled by Russia. The oil depot in Rivne Oblast has also been completely destroyed by the Russian missile strike. Now, the Ukrainian authorities have previously reported that Russian shelling has damaged buildings in the Kharkiv facility, which is the second largest city, but there has been no release of any sort of radiation. Now, meanwhile, Ukraine also claims that Russia has taken the Chernobyl staff town under its control, which is making the staff rotation at Chernobyl impossible. Deepak joins us live for more. Now, Deepak, thank you so much for joining us. Now, that's one part of the story. We're seeing that there's no end to the conflict between the two countries. And the other part of the story is the huge number of Ukrainians that are fleeing their own country. Now, if we go as per the UN estimates, more than 21 lakh people have already left. And the country which is single largestly, taking all the refugees is Poland, where I believe you are currently. What is the kind of humanitarian assistance that the country is offering, and also have they spoken about any long-term solution for them?
Well, it's very hard to really look at a long-term solution to a crisis like this, especially because at the end of the day, the people from Ukraine, of course, who've been fleeing, would want to really get back to their home country. But right now, when you look at the kind of devastation that many areas have taken, like Mariupol, like Kharkiv, well, going back there is going to be a distant dream. And that's where the role of all of these countries really come in. Like you mentioned, over 2 million fleeing from Ukraine, and several of them, of course, coming through Poland. And we should understand that, especially the Polish government here, allowing that for 18 months they can move around, stay in Ukraine if they can, accommodate themselves with friends and family. No sort of paperwork or documentation that's being required. So a lot of humanitarian assistance that's being given from the Polish side. But of course, they are running out of resources as well to help the refugees. We had Joe Biden, who arrived in Poland, also assured $1 billion aid in addition to the earlier aid that has been assured. He's also said that about 100,000 would be allowed refuge in the United States. So a lot, of course, being spoken about from that end. As far as the situation in Ukraine is concerned, it continues to get worse. It was almost like a message that was sent out yesterday when Lviv, one of the, it was rather considered safer to be in Lviv. In fact, several Ukrainians who couldn't, of course, leave Ukraine, didn't want to leave their family members behind. Mind you, those between the age of 18 and 60, the males in Ukraine are not allowed to leave. And, some of their wives, some of their family members are not willing to leave either. And they were taking shelter in Lviv. Several journalists, of course, are stationed in Lviv as well. And now with Russia yesterday, bombing Lviv, it just goes on to show that the war is anywhere but over, and it's going to go on. We've had President Zelensky of Ukraine, who's asked for more military assistance. We were seeing him honor some of the soldiers that have been, of course, relentlessly fighting this war yesterday. So any sort of dialogue between Ukraine and Russia hasn't really borne any fruit. So we'll really have to see in the coming days how the situation unfolds. And of course, for the refugees in particular, there needs to be more that should be done. And right now, that's what the discussion is about, as to how this sort of assistance can be given.
Absolutely, Deepak. In fact, thank you so much for getting us all those details. We'll keep coming back to you for the latest on this story. Now, Kyiv has turned into a fortress as Russia continues its relentless attack on the country. Nearly 4 million people have fled since the invasion began. Nearly 10 million have been internally displaced. Now, Times Network's Pradeep gets us this report from Kyiv.
Even more than 1 month, we've seen this war is continuing. The problem here remains the shelling and firing from the Russian side is on. All one can hear is the wail of air raid sirens. All one can see the screech of breaking glass, or there's a silence of death everywhere. So there are many problems being faced. We have already seen every fourth Ukrainian has almost lost his house. They are rendered homeless. 10 million people, they are forced to abandon their hearths at home and move towards safer shelter because of shelling of civilian areas by Russian troops. But Russian troops seem to be disoriented because they had never ever thought that they will be getting such a kind of a response from Ukrainian forces. They never thought that the Ukrainians are going to give them a tough fight because they thought it will be very easy for them. But here things seem to be deteriorating with each passing day. At the end of the day, it is the civilians who continue to face brunt of Russian shelling, and you'll find similar such hedgehogs being placed at several places, creating stumbling blocks because everybody is trying to ensure that at any cost they will not allow Russian troops to enter inside Kyiv. So such metal structures that have been welded are being put at different points, at vulnerable points, and everybody here is instructed that at any cost you have to prevent Russian tanks from moving inside, Russian troops from coming inside. And we have already seen many of the civilians, including the member parliament, they have joined territorial army so that they can also be with their armed forces, fight with them and fight shoulder to shoulder with them and help their troops to give a befitting response to Russian soldiers. And these are the kind of obstacles and barriers that have been created throughout Kyiv. So Kyiv looks like a fortress right now. Everywhere you'll find such obstruction, everywhere you'll find such structures, and these structures are meant to prevent any advancement or any movement of Russian troops. And right now I'm standing in the heart of the Kyiv city, and you can see how these obstacles are being created. But one thing is more important, that is the spirit of Ukrainians.
Now, out of the nearly 4 million people that have fled Ukraine, 2 million people have been welcomed by Poland. My colleague Deepak gets us this report from a refugee camp in Warsaw.
It's been over a month since the war between Ukraine and Russia began, and one thing that remains a big concern, of course, is the refugee crisis and the humanitarian side of it. Hundreds of refugees continue to, of course, come into Poland through the Ukrainian border, and you can see here, even at the Warsaw Central Station, even now you can see several Ukrainians who've come in, and there are, of course, supplies that are available for them in terms of shelter, in terms of food that's being given, right, that you see medical supplies, even, telecommunication that's being provided. Right now, of course, with Poland, of course, almost exhausting its resources, there comes the need for European countries and the West to really come in. And that's where Joe Biden's visit in Warsaw was considered so very important, because he just didn't, have these meetings, the bilateral talk between Andrzej Duda, the president of Poland, and, the other officials that he met. But he also did, say that the West will now aid in this refugee crisis by assuring $1 billion additional aid to, provide for the refugees. And also, he did say about 100,000 Ukrainians will be given refuge in the United States. So this was a very important statement that he did make while he was here, apart from visiting a reception center at the National Stadium here in Warsaw. But also some strong, fiery statements that did come in while he, of course, made a speech here in Warsaw in Poland, where he did say that, Putin cannot remain in power. He's, of course, called him a war criminal. He's called him a butcher. Now, the question here really lies in the fact that while these strong statements are coming in, what will really put an end to the war? He's also, of course, spoken about draining the resources, draining the income that Russia makes of selling oil to the European countries. So all of this has definitely come in. But what the people of Ukraine really are hoping for is to put an end to the war, to ensure that they can go back to their homes and live their normal lives. We'll have to see how long before that really happens, and whether Russia will really de-escalate, especially at a time when we've seen almost like a message being sent out by Putin while Biden was here in Poland, and we saw at that point in time Lviv being attacked, and it just goes on to show that a city that almost remained untouched by the Russian forces being targeted on the day Biden arrived and spoke, of course, extensively, did speak volumes about the intent of Russia. So it doesn't look like the war, as far as Russia is concerned, is coming to an end, or there is any plans of de-escalation at all.